Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of A Blind Insight. Myself, Simon Hill, and Billy Spateman. How you doing, Billy? You right?
All right, yeah, not too bad. Not too bad.
It's funny, we had quite seemed ages between us recorded the last couple, but then it only seems like we were here 5 minutes ago. So
yeah. Soon come round.
soon, but yeah. So got a few songs as usual, and hopefully a mix of good news, and I'll have my say on something that's bugged me in the news of late. But started on a bright note. As you may remember, I said I was sort of going through the process of I'd applied for a job and then ran into difficulties. With systems not being accessible, and I didn't sort of talk about it on here because there was so much going on. But basically, the long story short was that the original job I applied for with the DWP, I couldn't do, but they've now hopefully found me one I can. So I'll be working on the universal credit applications and queries and all that area of things. So it'll be interesting and no doubt stressful at times, but yeah, it's just a good relief to have it.
So probably within the last couple of weeks then you will do that.
Yeah, there's been a lot up in the air, and I've not taken anything for granted, but they've now said a start date of the 3rd of June, so...
Oh, great stuff.
So, yeah.
And is it very different to what you were going to try and do with them, or in terms of, what your function and stuff like that?
It's hard to say because I never got as far as sort of getting my teeth into the other job, but it's still, the other job was going to be working on disability benefits, so it's still, I imagine it'd be very similar, but just obviously slightly different processes, but yeah, so that's...
And is it similar, because you work for the police, and is it a similar sort of thing in terms of the paperwork side and that? And will they have to put into place anything that you need before you get there, or will you have almost like a not a training period, but a period where you can settle in?
Yeah, so that's kind of what the delay is now. While I'm not sort of, while I'm still a bit sceptical about the start date and everything, but that's what they've said. But yeah, so basically they'll need to make sure that my screen reader software is all there ready, because obviously there's no way around that. I can't use a computer and do the training without it, so they'll need to make sure that's there. It'll be different from what I've seen of the job. I went there on a visit just before Easter, and what I've seen and understand, it will be different to my jobs before, in that I won't just be answering phone calls. A lot of it will be dealing with information coming in online, and some phone calls, but if you need to find out more information from people, or follow things up, but it'll be a lot different to being stuck on the end of a phone answering goodness knows how many phone calls a day. So,
and in terms of the info on the screen, then is it a bit like we used to use when we did transcriptions? It used to then read the transcriptions to us, rather than you have to read the document yourself and then you work through the transcription. Pretty
much. I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, I've got an idea for one of the shows to demonstrate of what how a screen reader sounds. But I'm figuring out how that might work still. But yeah, essentially the screen reader has to interpret what you can see on the screen. So this is why text is okay, but then if there's lots of images and graphics and that sort of stuff, then it's there's not much you can do with that. It's not that as brilliant as it is. It's not that clever. So that's why things have to be done and set out in a certain way, so it can. The simpler the better, basically. If things are set out in a logical order, and the less complicated it is, the easier it is for the screen reader to understand.
It's strange. While you was talking there, I was just thinking, because you always get the argument as which would be the worst, to be deaf or to be blind. And I presume with deaf people that they've got the text at the bottom, but you have to, if you're listening to a film or a program, you've got to imagine what's going on, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's the old thing about when people throw it at me, oh, it could be worse. You could, and I think, yeah, but surely it's all. I mean, all I would say is, if you've only got one, be it being blind, being deaf, that's, again, a world away from. I mean, being blind, deaf, would just be unbearable. I can't begin to imagine what the quality of life must be. But then people do live like that, and so I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think at the end of the day, the way I see it is, if you're deaf, then you can still drive, for instance. You can potentially have hearing aids, or again, it's something I'll never really be able to experience, but I imagine it must be very sort of, I don't know, I always think, it must be tiring in a way, having to read everything that's said on a screen. You know what I mean? You can't just sort of switch off and listen to it. You've got to read every word, and so that must be very. I can't. I'd be very interested to know whether deaf people do find that enjoyable as such, or whether it's just that's what they have to do, so they do it. But yeah, it would. Imagine a film, of 2 hours or whatever, and having to read every single word, and so yeah.
I sometimes put the text on to see what it would, and you do type. In fact, you sort of don't. They must get up to speed, for want of a better word. But I find that you ain't got enough time to read the text half the time that's on the screen.
But when you think, because so often there's usually one person talks, then another, or sometimes two people. To get all of that in, it's a bit like audio description. Audio description can only tell you so much in the time it's got. Yeah. So yeah, it must be very. It's one of those, something's better than nothing, but it obviously, of course, doesn't give you the full experience of being able to see everything that's happening, or listen to it. Because obviously they don't get the sound effects and the music, and so I think it's a 50-50 thing. I think at the end of the day, it would be. I think it's just as bad for different reasons. Not being able to hear as it is not being able to see would be my answer. But obviously, it's and
technology from you see articles in the paper about research projects and that, it does seem to progress at a quicker rate for deaf people than it does for blind people. And you have all these contraptions. They say, we can insert this, we can do this, and it'll prove this, and it'll do that. But you very rarely hear any progress in terms of, helping a person who's blind in terms of the sight. Can they? It's almost like, that's it, it's done, we can't do anything about it. But there are options, isn't there, with deaf people in terms of what they can do?
I think so. And again, it'd be interesting to get a deaf person's point of view on this. But I would say the technology, I think, like I said, not being able to hear doesn't restrict you, as in terms of you'll still be able to use computers, you'll still be able to use phones, you'll still be able to use cash points, you'll still be able to walk around, see where you're going, do what you need to do. That the problems in terms of data, it's mainly communicating, really, I guess, that becomes the issue. Communicating with other people if you need them, sign language and that. So that's where the difficulty comes with being deaf. But with being blind, it's like I say, you can't interact with. You can't just turn up and use a self-service checkout, for example, or or a cash point, or they are supposedly now there are talking cash points around, but you have to remember to have your headphones with you to plug in, or so it. Whereas I think there's more.
There's less reliant on somebody.
Yeah, you've got more. I think your eyes give you a lot more than than listening does in a way. You know what I mean? You can do much more with just being, as long as you can see something, you can do a lot more than, because I mean, let's face it, a lot of people go around with, the headphones in, music in their ears anyway, so they're not really listening to what's going on around them anyway. So yeah, I think it's such a bigger job to make something work for a blind person than it is for a deaf person. It's but yeah, it's an interesting comparison, certainly.
And is it? I mean, if you say you're at the Baggies and you're listening to the game,
yeah,
is it difficult to follow the game in terms of just from an audio point of view, or does it depend on who's commentating, who's actually doing the commentating? Because it must be that they're always slightly behind what's going on, and in relation to what's physically going on the pitch.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, it depends absolutely on the quality of the commentary. So, but generally speaking, I mean, even the best commentators in the world, at the end of the day, they're reacting to what's happened. So they've got to, by the time they've got the words out, the ball has probably gone to so and so, then on to somewhere else. But and as long as they are only a sort of second behind, but yeah, then it's fine. But I think I've said on this show before, it's one of my frustrations with modern day commentary, which I don't understand on radio, because in the day on radio nobody can see what's going on. So why radio commentators drift off and start rabbiting about statistics or games that happened in the past? Sorry, what's going on here now? So I don't understand why that seems to have crept into the modern style of commentating rather than just describing what's happening in front of them. But yeah, it absolutely depends on the commentator, focusing on what's going on at the time and not drifting off and talking about. But I find it's okay. And
do they use the same? Do they use the same audio? Same person every time at the Baggies, or do you get different commentators?
No, it's unless obviously they're not away or on holiday. But it's the same people each time, and then likewise, and of course, likewise, you've got the local commentary on local radio as well. So yeah, by and large, it's the same people, and I mean, it was good because I working with the All Access Albion groups I do to try and improve things for disabled supporters. One of the first things I did was mention the fact that the commentary sometimes was a bit frustrating because they were busy talking about things rather than describing the game, and they do seem to have taken that on board now, and they are more descriptive of what they're saying. So I think it's just a case of people not realising sometimes, but it's just sometimes remind them, you are commentating for some people who can't see what's going on for themselves. So everything you say is absolutely all the information they get. But yeah, there is a common theme with it being the same people each time. Which
does it make it easier because it's a familiar voice?
I don't think that.
I mean, say you went to an away game and it's some Geordie bloke going on. Would that make it more?
Well,
nothing against Geordie blokes.
No, I don't. But no, it's funny because I've recently started going to away games, and in this day and age, you should be able to. If you can't get a local radio commentary, you should be able to get a commentary provided. Like I'm going to Sheffield Wednesday tomorrow, as it happens, to watch the Baggies, and I've got to collect a headset there to get the commentary. But of course, they're biased. Some worse than others, but you expect they're going to be biased towards the home team. Yeah. So I mean, I had a game recently, an away game. I was listening to the commentary, and Albion scored, and the commentators just went silent. So, okay. The only reason I knew we'd scored is because the crowd were going balmy around me. So but there are. I mean, if you listen to enough, commentators have their different styles. Some are more sort of. Some get more excited, whereas others are quite level, stay quite level, and and so they've got their own styles.
So which would you? I was just thinking about that. If you're watching it, like my son-in-law goes to the Baggies, and he'll be up out the seat and jumping about. If the commentator's fairly tempered in a way, does that detract from the excitement of the goal? Would you sooner scream and and really give it one in order for you to experience what somebody next year is experiencing, I suppose?
Oh no, well, I mean, if I'm there at the game, then the minute a goal goes in, I can't hear what the commentator's saying anyway. So I have to, in that second, a goal's gone in, and then I'm not even listening to them for the next few seconds. So, but if I'm listening back to it's like it's within reason. Like I think some commentators, if I'm listening to it on the radio, and I think some commentators go a bit over the top. Whereas others, it's just a natural excitement sort of thing. But yeah, some of them do have a bit of a scream, which I think is a bit, a bit over the top. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's each their own. Some people's styles, people will enjoy. Other people's will think, oh, they're a bit loud or a bit, bit over the top. But at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, as long as I've got a good understanding of what's going on, and then that's it. Like I said, if you're away, you expect the commentary's going to be a bit wanting the other team to win, but that still doesn't change as long as they're describing what's happening. Then where the ball is and what's happening. That's the main thing.
So off the blindness, what's the chances then of making the playoffs and getting up?
Spoofy. Well, a couple of weeks ago, people were just saying, "Oh, we don't need another win," and then here we are, and we haven't got another win, and now all of a sudden we've got 2 games.
Is that all that's left too?
Yeah, just 2
really?
games left.
Oh my God! Oh, of course, because he finishes before the Premiership, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, really, so Sheffield Wednesday away tomorrow. They need the points because they're to stay up. So, that's not going to be easy by any means. And then. Last game against Preston. Preston got nothing to play for now. So, but of course, I just never like things going down to the last game because it's just, it's horrible. So,
but theoretically, if they make the playoffs, are they ready in terms of going up? In terms of a club ready to go up to the Premiership again, or is it like a yo-yo thing? I mean, Leicester come down, and it looks as though they're going to go straight back up.
We would struggle if we went up. I mean, the reality is there just isn't the funds to go, and we would need quite a few. There's already going to be a lot of players leave in the summer, regardless, and so there'd be a lot of changes needed. And although the new owner's coming now, there's still a lot of financial baggage to be sorted out. So I think if we did go up, then it would be a struggle, and we'd more than likely come back down again. But sometimes you need that, in order to, if you accept that that's the case, and you pick up the money from it, and so on, and then build again. Then eventually you can potentially get to establishing yourself, but it's such a gap now between the bottom of even the top of the Championship and the bottom third of the Premier League, and then there's just the money that's around, the difference in money, the difference in all the it's just getting more because the TV are paying more, they're offering more, but it's only to the Premier League that the EFL Football League only gets in the end a fraction really of what they get, and in the end, I mean, hopefully with the rules coming in with financial fair play, that will help close the gap. But then there still seems to be this thing where certain clubs are still not, still able to go and spend large amounts of money. So
I think the psyche of a lot of the, not lesser clubs, but the clubs who haven't got much money, has changed now. The supporters think, oh well, what happens. If we go up and we come down, it doesn't really matter. Let's go and experience and enjoy it for a season. We ain't going to get uptight about it.
Well, it's funny you say that, but it's with Albion. I mean, I have to think about it because it's just I've been supporting them now for getting on 30 years, but then there are some supporters now who even if you're not winning games, are moaning and groaning, but you think, well, you can't win them all, and we haven't played. But then you remember that some people only ever really remember you being in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So although that was to a lot of us who it was an amazing thing to start with, but then the expectation goes up, and so all of a sudden people aren't happy, or you've got the moaning and groaning, and you think, well, you know, compared to where we were, so, but you know, and like I said, you can't, you know, football doesn't work in the way that just because on paper you should win a game doesn't mean you will, and vice versa, and that's at the end of the day what the appeal is.
Yeah, so. And I think the unfortunate thing with a lot of clubs is nostalgia plays a massive part, and you always, I mean, Manchester United is a prime example since Ferguson's gone. You know, we should be here. Well, no, because you ain't good enough at the moment.
It's like a national crisis at the moment that Manchester United aren't. You know,
yeah, why aren't they doing it? Because they ain't got the and with the Baggies, it's like, I remember when Bobby Hope was playing in Ireland, and we had a great side. Yeah, but it's different. It's a different world now.
The game, well, you know,
and the game's changed.
Players don't play forever. The game's changed probably beyond recognition in many ways since, you know, those days. And, you know, when you listen to former players talking, they say some things are better, but some things are not so good, and vice versa. You know, so yeah, you know, you just, and then it's like people do that thing which I hate, which is comparing players and teams from different eras, and I just think, well, you can't, you know, it's just completely.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and he was going, if Jimmy Greaves was here today, he'd be so-and-so, so-and-so. Go, well, you don't know that, because he might not be able to adapt to a modern way of playing.
He might not have been that fit, you know. Yeah. You know, were players back then, they might have been skillful, but were they that fit, you know? Probably, you know, they used to go out and smoke and drink, you know, whereas nowadays it's...
Exactly.
You know, you've got to be... So, no, it's, you know, at the end of the day, it is what it is. But no, it's... End of the day, from Albion's point of view, we just hope now they've got an owner that's going to run it properly, and if we do go up, great. I mean, it's funny though, I want to get in the playoffs, but then I'm thinking, I don't know if I could bear getting to Wembley and losing a final. It's just... Yeah,
that must be awful, isn't it? And I always find it's really weird. I mean, say, particularly if there's like a massive gap points-wise. So say there's, I don't know, first, second, third, and then there's a 10-point gap between third and fourth and fifth and sixth, and you think, and then sixth get through to the Premiership.
No, well,
that third place team must be so good. Well, the fourth and fifth, but the third place team that's almost made it must think, well, hang on a minute, we were 10 points in front here.
Yeah.
And we're not going to the Premiership. It must be absolute heartache, hasn't it, for them?
Well, it's the playoffs. They're great if you don't finish. You know, if you don't finish third, then it's a bonus to have it. You get the crack at promotion, but to finish third, and normally, of course, they've normally missed out by a very small margin.
Yeah.
So then, and I mean, there's a statistic somewhere that say how often the team that finishes sixth go up compared to the one that finishes third because of the hangover or disappointment, and that's the thing. Like with Albion now, it's whatever you do, you want to go into the playoffs winning games with momentum, because if you go into it stuttering or not playing well, then the chances are you'll get beat. So,
get beat.
But I'm afraid I'm going to go into a bit of a somber mode now.
Well, we've put the baggies to right. We've put films and everything to right. So,
and like I say, this is just my thoughts. I'm not telling other people what to think. It's just my view on it. And again, interested to hear other people's points of view on it. But just a quick now, may have been 2 weeks ago now, there was an announcement made by the government, which was essentially talking about clamping down on the sick note culture, I think, as it was put. Basically, looking at what the amount of, because we're told the amount of people that are on benefits and not working is going up. People, and people claim they can't work because of ill health, so not because there isn't jobs out there, or even that they've already got a job, but they're just saying they can't work due to ill health, whether it's been something physical, something mental, and so they have to keep getting sick notes, which of course takes up GP time and etc. But and they were talking about more support for getting people into work, or the rules that if people aren't actively looking for work within 12 months, or they refuse something like 2 jobs, then eventually that their benefits will be stopped. And then of course people say, oh, you can't do that because how would they live, etc. But the main thing that sort of frustrated me from the point of view of a person with a disability was some disability charities jumped on board and basically criticised the government, saying that by doing this, they'd be persecuting people with disabilities and putting them into poverty, etc., etc. But I don't agree with that. I think that's at the end of the day, if you've got a disability, then that's diagnosed. You've got your proof of disability, whatever it is. You don't have to get a sick note for a disability that's a permanent fixture. So and at the end of the day, it's the people that do claim that they've got a disability or say, I can't work because of my mental health, or my knees hurt today, or my back hurts, and you think, well, it's these people that clog up the benefit system that ultimately have an impact on the support that those of us that do have a disability but are trying to find work, the support that we get, because the time and money is taken up.
Are they targeting? Obviously, he's targeting sick note people. Not, I mean, if you say if you've got a disability and it's registered as a disability, you don't need sick notes. You don't need this unless you're sick at work.
Yeah,
but that's different.
That's a different matter.
Yeah, but so that really he's trying to weed out people that there aren't or haven't got a disability, but are using the system in terms of to try and benefit themselves. Also, I think in modern society, there are so many things now that are categorised that weren't, even 10 years ago. Like mental health has opened a great can of worms where people can say, well, I feel depressed.
Yeah.
I need a week off. Whereas, when I was a kid, you wouldn't even entertain, you're a bit fed up. Your dad would say, well, get yourself off to work and it'll pass, sort of thing. And you just got on with it. But now it opens the door where you can go, well, I think I better get... And I'm not decrying anybody who's depressed or anybody who's got mental health problems, but it has opened a door for people, hasn't it? In a way.
But and I'm talking as somebody who, even here today, I'm taking antidepressants. I've, over the last few years, certainly, I've really struggled with my mental health, but the one main reason that I have is because of not being able to get a job.
Yeah,
and so that's the and I've heard it said before. That's the thing. If you don't, the people that say they're depressed or why is that? There's got to be a cause or something. And for me it's the case of being blind, the frustration and things that the effect that has on my life that gets me down. And I've had, as well as medication, I've had counselling, I've talked things over, but ultimately it helps in the moment, but ultimately it doesn't change the fact I'm blind and nobody ever can. And, and that's, in my experience, the attitude, most people who have a disability, no one can change it by talking about it. So they want to try and, get on in life, but they just need a bit of some support to do that. But if you got out there, if you're sat at home all the time, then your mental health's going to, because you've got no purpose, and whereas if they got out there and got a job, I absolutely, believe that would help your mental health, because, just sitting here now, knowing that I've got hopefully a job, coming, and in a couple of months I'll have a wage in my pocket again, and that's made me feel instantly better about life.
And purpose is a really important word, isn't it? Because,
I think so.
There's got to be some goal that you can try and achieve. Well, otherwise, what's the point, in a way?
Well, do people... I mean, we constantly hear about the cost of living, and people, we keep hearing this thing about living in poverty. Well, hang on a minute. How many of these people don't have a job? If you've got a job, that's straight... yes, some jobs are paid more than others, and that's the way of life. That's the way it is. Some jobs are more skilled, some jobs aren't, but any job you get near enough will give you a better income and a better quality of life. And then, of course, it spirals on from that, because people then sat at home, they're not going to work, they're on the sick or whatever, or getting benefits. Then what do they do with their time? They get involved with things like online gambling. So they sit there, gamble their money away, get into debt and all sorts of madness, And you think, well, you wouldn't do that if you were doing a job and didn't have so much time on your hands. And so it just really...
Is it easy to fall... I mean, you haven't worked for a bit and you've got a job now. Is it easy to fall into that, I don't know, that comfortable state of mind where you think, well, I ain't going to get a job, so I might as well just carry on signing on, and you get used to that culture of life in a way?
Well, I guess it must do, and I can see how it happens. But I mean, surely, I couldn't go on. I've been absolutely, I mean, if I do get a wage again, I'm going to have to pay off a few £1,000s in credit cards and an overdraft, because that's what I've been using to survive for the last 4 or 5 years now. So I can see how it happens like that, but I think ultimately, unless you've got somebody else who is working or some other means of income or support, financial support, then really, if you want any sort of, I mean, do these people not want to do things? If you want to, hobbies, interests, anything, holidays, all the good stuff in life, in the end, you need money, one way or another. And so I can see slipping into a comfort zone and getting and liking the idea of obviously having your time is yours and you're at home, or you can. But in the end, there must be times when you think, oh, if I only had a bit more money, I could do that, or I could treat myself to that, but yeah, there's got to be a point where you think, well, there's got to be more to life than this. I mean,
Do you think the charities who, took up the banner didn't really understand the reasons why it was done, in a way, and they weren't, I don't know, they weren't actually representing people with disabilities? Well, speaking the voice, because I mean, I don't know, you might be a one out on their own, but like-minded people like you that have got disabilities might think, well, actually, I don't think that.
No, but and I spoke to a, the one or two that I know to say, is it me?
Yeah.
And they said no, because I think what annoys us is that those of us that want, I've never. Although, there are people who work for these charities who their role is employment advisors or along those lines. So, in other words, they will say, we'll help, in this case, blind people to find employment. I've never found a job or anything through any of those people. And yet, so they don't do that bit very well. But then anything to do with benefits or that, they're quickly out there jumping up and down and shouting about it. Whereas when it comes to actually going out there and working with employers and shouting up about, look, you can employ a blind person, it doesn't need to be that, all this, they don't seem to put as much work into that as they do about crying when they think the benefit system is going to be messed with.
Do you think that's a good, I mean, because on Extra, it's an interesting point there, is on Extra we've got charities like Suits, the drug rehabilitation people, we've got AA obviously in Al-Anon, and almost everybody that works in those organisations has lived the experience. So when somebody comes in, and I mean, Suits say, well, we help people out with benefits, we help people out with this, not necessarily just their addiction. But they say, because we've lived the experience, our first thing is we understand that person.
Yeah.
And do you think it's maybe a cause of it's a textbook thing that they've gone through? They've not lived, the experience that you've lived, and therefore they don't really understand what you want or what somebody with a disability wants.
Well, yeah, I think. But then again, that there are, I don't know the numbers, but there are, I know of at least 2 blind people who work for the RNIB, for example. So I think there are people within these organisations that have got the lived experience of having the disability, but yeah, it's just interesting where they get their ideas from, and I mean, it's like all these surveys and polls, and they put it out and say, oh, X amount of people think this. Oh, well, you haven't asked me. So,
yeah.
Where do they get it from? The numbers. So they get their information from somewhere. But yeah, I just think it's maybe a bit more effort put into actually finding out what the people you think or say you're serving or helping actually think and want, rather than just playing the same tune all the time.
And I mean, it's obviously done for good intentions, but it's almost like, I don't know, opening the gate before knock a bull at the gate, and they're sort of not. If they'd have taken a couple of days to ask people with disabilities, and then said, well, we've asked the people with disabilities, and they feel this. They feel that they're doing right for standing up for people, without actually asking the people that it's affecting, I suppose.
But not just that. It's kind of their branding, or I feel they're putting you as a disabled person as in somebody that doesn't work or doesn't want to work. Well, that's not the case. If you know, they're not talking about if you're a disabled person and you want to work. Well, then they're not talking about you, are they? Because you're not asking for sick notes.
Yeah.
So they're only and most of us have known or do know somebody that has been abusing the benefit system or not using it for what it should be used for, and people get so annoyed with it. And it's things like this that make governments frightened of trying to deal with it. And it's so rather than just putting a blanket over the whole lot and saying, "Oh, you're going after disabled people." No, you're not. You're not talking about. Let's break it down and talk about how it's broken down and pinpoint where the problem is and what and the kind of people that we're looking at. And that would be a more measured approach rather than just someone tries to solve something. Oh, you can't do that. Well, that's that then. And we're never going to solve things because no one's allowed to try and wheedle out the fraudsters and the cheats and all the rest of it. So,
and I suppose then you've got to take in the whole circus that is politics, and they do it at a particular time to cause a particular reaction to
Oh yeah,
and so you just have to accept that. But the run-of-the-mill person will just listen to whatever said and okay, we'll do that because they say we've got to do that. So there's all that goes on, really, isn't it? But it is something that I mean, when I heard it, I didn't really take a lot of notice. No. But then I can totally understand if somebody who's disabled and struggling to get a job, saying, "Well, it ain't me. I don't know what you're saying. It's me because it's not me."
Yeah,
you're not representing me. At all,
and that's coming from the charities. The government didn't mention disabled people.
No,
they mentioned people claiming to be on the sick. When whereas the charities then, hold on, you're picking on our members or group, whatever you want to call it. So the government then think, oh dear, and then and so then the people who are getting away with it continue to get away with it because they don't. Obviously, governments don't want to lose votes, so then they don't. Then it gets put on the back burner and ignored again. So.
I mean, it's always a case that there's always somebody who knows how to work the system, and I mean, when we worked in dementia, a lot of the people that worked in dementia would only do 15 or 16 hours because then they were on benefits and the benefits had stopped. So theoretically, they calculated, well, if I'm going to do 17 hours, then I need to do 30 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do 30 hours, so therefore I'm not going to do 60. I'm not going to do 17 hours. End of story. If somebody didn't turn up for a shift, can you stay 2 hours? No, I can't. Yeah. Not because they didn't want to, but it was just so complicated. Everything was made so complicated. So you sort of understand that part as well. And it might be their circumstances why they're on benefits, and there's no criticism of that. So the system itself kicks itself in the teeth in a way, in some respects, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a bit like it's like I always say about the tax system. The tax system, to my mind, is unnecessarily complicated. Why can't we all just pay, X amount, 10% or whatever of what you earn? Then everybody, then if you earn, 10 grand a year or 100 grand a year, you're paying 10% of what you earn. But instead of that, we go through this thing of, higher rate, lower rate and all that. And with the benefit, like with universal credit, that's the thing where it's, you are able to work and it's more flexible. So because that was the thing, the cut-off point, you didn't want to fall off a cliff. Oh, I've worked 20 hours this week, but then I've lost my 16 hours worth of whatever. So it's very complicated.
And you think, well, that person's under incredible pressure because she might, love a job, And she might want to. I mean, she obviously wants to do it, but she can't financially. She can't because you're not offering enough hours to make it worth the while doing it. Or she might not be able to do the 30 hours because of other commitments in terms of children, and that's so strange. Right, Tom, we've got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, it flies. I think I'm going to have to put in to have a 2-hour show at this point. But yeah, so I'll just talk then about, I mentioned on the last episode about the walk, the challenge I've got myself involved in. From Wembley to the Hawthorns. So in aid of the Albion Foundation. So people can donate to my page the easiest way is to Google Simon Hill Albion Foundation Blind Walk, and then that'll bring up the link for my personal page. But you can see everybody that's doing it. And
are any of it's after the season's finished, obviously.
No, it's
right.
No, it's Monday morning we start.
This
coming Monday, yeah.
And how long do they reckon that you got to get back for the match of you?
Yeah, that's so the schedule is now. So we travel down to Wembley Monday morning, walk from Wembley to Hemel Hempstead. Tuesdays Hemel Hempstead to Milton Keynes. Wednesdays Milton Keynes to Daventry. Thursday Daventry to Warwick. Friday Warwick to Birmingham. And then Saturday morning, it's about 3 or 4 miles from middle of Birmingham to the Hawthorns.
Hawthorn. Blimey. And that's the last match of the season, is it?
That's the last time. I mean,
so presumably it's supposed to be a magnificent entrance just before the game, is it?
Well, not quite. We're aiming to get there about sort of 10, half 10. The game doesn't kick off till 12:30. So I'm not sure what they've got. And then at half time we'll get to go on the side of the pitch. But I'm kind of a bit. Well, it may be all right. But when we did it, when I did it before from Liverpool about 10 years ago, the getting to go around the pitch at half time was one of the highlight really for me. So that was one of the main reasons I decided to do it this time.
Yeah.
So, but they're now saying that there might not be time for us to do a lap of the pitch. So I was like, joking.
What, before or half time?
At half time.
Oh, right.
So,
really?
So I really hope they manage to squeeze that in.
Or even if you just walk out on the pitch.
We'll go on the side of the pitch, but
and then the funds you raise go to the foundation, and is that a communal thing, the Albion Foundation?
Yeah. So it's the the charity arm of the club, and they do all kinds of things in the community, not just football related.
Yeah.
But so in terms of specifically this money, they're saying is going to be used for projects to do with blind football.
Great.
But they obviously do all different disability football, walking football, lots of work in local schools with assisting with physical education there, and and then things for the elderly, people who are living with dementia. It's endless, really, the things they're involved with. So,
are any old players doing it?
Yeah, just the Andy Johnson.
Andy Johnson, yeah.
So he's quite a character. So I've only met him briefly, but if I'm going to be no doubt be guided by him at some point for a few hours, so that'll be lively. So,
and have you been in training, or no? You're just going to do it? Wing it?
Well, I've done what I mean. It's one of those, finding the time to walk. Sort of.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of 8 and 7 or 8 milers in walks. So that's more than I did in prep for the last time. So. Yeah, it's going to be hard, obviously, and obviously it's a different thing going. It's one thing doing it for one day and then you're done, but going one day then the next day.
Yeah. And I suppose if you do get any sores on your feet and all that, makes it even more. But you'll get there. I mean, Busking for Charities doing a Rowley Bonk climbing about 3 weeks Sunday, and it's 50 times up and down Rowley Bonk, and I'm absolutely dreading it for our charity. I've got to 24 and it's 2.5 hours, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be out here 5 hours. I can't be doing this.
Well, I was thinking because it's May with the weather, but now I'm hearing now they're talking about the weather plummeting to.
Oh really? Sub-zero temperatures.
I've got no idea. We're going to have to. Well, I don't mind it being chilly. I just don't want it to rain. That's just the main thing.
That must be really depressing if you're wet and cold and stuff and windy and stuff like that. Must be
we'll see.